We are live on Facebook.
Hey everybody, Marianne Williamson here, and welcome to the seventh night of our down ballot progressive candidate summit.com. If ever there was a time to make a break for something new, to make a break with the old and to begin something new, it's right now. That's the zeitgeist. That's this moment in America. Something is happening. And what's happening is that we are looking at so many things going on in this country and saying, that's not good enough, and realizing it doesn't have to be. We can change things. There are a lot of establishment attitudes. There are a lot of establishment systems all across the board that are simply inadequate to the times at hand. And right now, within the Democratic Party, a lot of the shuffling, a lot of the okay, out with the old, in with the new is going on even within this great blue wave. You know, there's blue and then there's blue. There's the corporatist blue, which is the corporatist Democrat, and then the progressive blue. And the progressive blue is the imaginal cells, just like when a caterpillar just sort of disintegrates into the soup, and it's called imaginal cells, and out of that comes the butterfly. That's the moment we're living in. And imaginal cells are popping up everywhere. What does that mean? People who are really talking about alternatives, really talking about a new way forward, really talking about bringing forth, presenting to the American people ideas for how to do the future differently than the past. It is ridiculous to think that if we just bring in the same old people, that they're going to do anything different than what they've done. Politics is not about good people versus bad people. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about nice people versus nice people. This is not personal. But when you look at so many, even of the Democrats, particularly those who have taken strong leadership positions, I'm sorry, they have failed. They have failed to mount the effective opposition to Donald Trump that needed to be mounted. And more than that, they have kept entrenched systems in place that obviously are failing the party and failing the people. And nowhere is this more obvious than in a woman that I'm sure once again is a nice woman, Debbie Wasserman Schultz of Florida, who used to be the DNC chair. I'm sure many of you remember her from that debacle of the 2016 election. Well, guess what? She has a great opponent. There is a great woman who's running against her in her primary, August 18th. There is someone who's running against Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and with your help, we can actually make her the nominee. I want to introduce you to Jen Pereman. Pearlman, pronounced Pearlman, Jen Pearlman. Jen, enter into the Zoom room with me. I'm so glad that you're here with us. Unmute yourself. You need to unmute so we can talk.
Hi.
Hi. So Jen, I'm glad you're here, and more than that, I'm very glad that you're running. And I'm very impressed by your background. I'm impressed by your policies. I know that you've worked a lot with criminal justice, particularly among youth. I know you've worked a lot with restoring voting rights to disenfranchised voters. I know you stand for reparations. I know you have very strong feelings about what's going on in America today. So I really want to begin by giving the floor to you. I know many people think of someone like Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She's been in Congress for what, 16 years? I mean, come on. And then before that, she was in the state legislature, you said, of Florida for 14 years. Before that, she was in college. This is where she's been. This is the embodiment of the career politician. And there's a lot of movement. We just want to break free of so much of that and bring forth something new. But there are two things that come up for people. Number one, are you strong enough to beat her? What is it that you present that makes you think that if we support you, you can actually win this race? And number two, if you do win this race, what are you going to do in Washington? So let my audience, your audience tonight also hear the answers to that question, because I know people want to know.
Sure. Hi. Well, first, thank you so much for doing this. And for people that are struggling like me in terms of grassroots down ballot candidates, especially when we can't canvass, having support from people like you is just, it's immeasurable. So the main problem that we have in politics in this country, and we could debate little policies here and there, and we can agree on some things and not agree on other things. But the reality is, so long as the people that are our representatives are corporate owned and controlled by special interests, then we're not even able to have reasonable discussions onto those specific policy issues. So, and this is something that we've gotten into now with this culture of, it's like everything is all or nothing, in a way that it's like this cancel culture. So if I don't agree with you on absolutely everything, then forget it. Then you're not my person. And I think we need to start looking at the quality of the individuals that we're looking at electing. Is this somebody that has integrity? Is this somebody that is not bought and paid for? Is this somebody that will use science and math and good judgment and surround themselves with smart people? And I think we really need to shift the paradigm to where we're looking at those types of issues instead of labels and colors and D's and R's and all of those things, when in fact, they're all working for the same establishment corporations. And so, I mean, I would say that we need to have people that not only are not corporate, but don't also see this as a career. And that's an important factor, because if you're not taking corporate money, but you're still looking out for what your next move is going to be and what alliances you have to form and who you have to be, figuratively in bed with, then you're looking out for your career as well. And that also is another distraction from representing your constituents. So I think the fact that I don't take corporate money and I don't see this as a career, and I really do see this as a term of service, is a major shift in paradigm. And I think it's very unusual for people. It's been very well received. We've been running a service campaign down here for about 8 months now. And I've been treating this campaign as a service opportunity the entire time. So since we see it as a term of service, we decided we're just going to show this district what that looks like.
Tell me what's going on in America today. What are your thoughts about the protests? What are your thoughts about police culture? What needs to be done? What's going on?
Okay, so I'm going to come at this with my whole bleeding heart hippie self. And the reality is that I've been expecting this a long time ago. Like, I don't understand how this didn't happen sooner. I think it's just started. I think, unfortunately, it's going to get more violent. And I think it's inevitable. I think that you can only oppress people for so long before they're inevitably going to rise up and take power, because power will concede nothing. And so I'm not a proponent of violence, but I understand that level of rage, and I understand where that comes from. And so for people to think that, oh, this is just about George Floyd, or it's just about police brutality, the police brutality is just the tip of the iceberg. Like, it is just the part that you see the most. So it's the most blatant because it's in your face. But the white supremacy of the entire criminal justice system from start to finish is rampant. That's what I think. So to me, on the one hand, I'm upset that this is going on, but on the other hand, I'd be infinitely more upset if we all watched George Floyd get murdered and this wasn't going on.
I really agree with you. I think that in a way, this kind of thing was overdue. And I think that anytime you have a crisis, whether it's a personal crisis or a national crisis, all that a nation is a group of individuals. A crisis is actually sitting on top of accumulated layers of trauma. So that what's coming up now is a sense of fury, as you said, that has to do with more than George Floyd, even more than race, I think. The economic injustice, the criminal injustice, the environmental injustice, all of the ways in which the system expresses such a disregard for everyone but a small 1% of the population of the people. And unfortunately, even under Democratic administrations, the profound transfer of wealth into the hands of 1% has continued unabated. The corporate bailout right now during COVID is just the same template as the last one. And that's why I think it's so important that these changes are necessary inside the Democratic Party. It's not as simple as, oh, just elect Democrats. And that's why I think candidates such as yourself are so important for us to see. And that's why I wanted you here tonight, because I want Democrats also and independents, so many people to see that we do have alternatives. I think people are feeling so helpless because they tend to think, well, where can we go? What can we do? And then once people realize Congress is a co-equal branch of government, even if somebody's not in your district or even in your state, they will be voting on legislation that affects your life as well. I know that you are someone who stands for reparations. Can you tell me specifically how you see that working?
You know, I've thought about this over the past, I don't know how many years. And, you know, you hear people talking about this idea of everybody getting a check so that you would just sort of break down the money and everybody would get almost like a dividend. And I'm not opposed to that in theory, but the problem, it won't solve the problem. It won't even come close to solving the problem.
It would be very difficult to know specifically who would be, yeah.
Yeah. And well, that's its own trouble. So what do you start blood testing people? I mean, you know, that's its own can of worms. But
Yeah.
More than that, it wouldn't help. If you gave, let's say you gave every African-American descendant few $1,000s or whatever it is that it would come down to, that's not going to solve the systemic rot in our institutions. And it's not going to actually create the generational wealth that they have not been able to accumulate. So it doesn't solve the problem. So I would say, like, while I support the idea of a UBI, as far as reparations, to me, it's more of, and a gentleman I watch on YouTube, his name is Bo of the Fifth Column, and he's awesome. And
Yeah, I love him. Yeah.
Okay. So his thing about reparations to me was brilliant. And it was essentially similar to what you're putting forward about, you have this, basically this endowment, and it's looked over by the people who know what they want to do with it for their own communities. But he spoke of it almost as it's low interest loans. You have an idea in your community and you want to do this, you get the same loan that we're giving to all the people that get the good loans, and not ripping you off with usury payday loans. So it's using that money, it's using an endowment to help build up communities so that they are self-sustaining communities and have access to healthy food and everything that isn't necessarily the most profitable thing, but that they have access to those things. So I think that I see it as a big endowment. I see it as a big endowment that is an investment into communities that need it the most.
It would seem to me the endowment should be in how, whether it's low interest loans, whether it has to do with real estate development. Real estate development, I think, would be a very important piece of it, because gentrification is such an issue. Also having to do with children, so many things. But I always, except within the very wide berth of economic and educational renewal, I think that endowment, who should decide whether it's low interest loans or whatever, I personally think it should be Black people who make that decision. Yeah,
Absolutely. And not a team of political people. It should be like a wide range of, I mean, I like the way that you sort of phrased it, where it's like you have to have academic people. You have to have people that understand how it works, not just somebody that's like in a political appointment to a
I envisioned a reparations council that would be a wide array, a variety of Black leaders, whether it has to do with politics, academia, culture. There are many fields of Black wealth, including Black economists. I mean, you'd be talking about a lot of money, and but once again, the decision of who that should be should have as much, I mean, obviously, has to be people trusted across the board. But the very fact that we're at a point where the conversation is taking place, I think is so important. And I think it's so important that now more and more white people are talking about it as well. I know one of the things I found on my campaign, and even the whitest states in America, when I would talk about reparations, people who were like, what? I don't understand. But then when you would give even a 5-minute thumbnail sketch of the real history of race in the United States, starting with the original slave ships in 1619, the 2.5 centuries of slavery, followed by another 100 years, except for the 12 years of Reconstruction, of further institutionalized violence against Black people. You know, Americans are not stupid, and I think we're good people. I mean, I don't think we're better than other people, but I think the average American has a real sense of decency. And when the history is really explained, what the Civil Rights Act did, desegregating, what the Voting Rights Act did, guaranteeing universal voting, which of course that's been chipped away at. And then that third piece just never got done. And Martin Luther King was killed in '68. Richard Nixon came in with benign neglect. It's simply a piece that we still have to get to. And until we do address that gaping hole of economic disparity between Black and white, this underlying tension and anxiety is going to continue to be with us. And for you to be in Congress talking about it, that's what we need. People, not just outside the electoral system, but inside, who are going to talk about it. So it's one of the things I think is so wonderful about your campaign. Other than that, what are other issues that you feel very strongly about that you would want to handle and be part of your service, as you said, in the House of Representatives?
Our top 3 issues are, I mean, single payer healthcare to me has to happen yesterday. To me, that would be the single greatest gift to everybody across the board in the quickest amount of time. And it would so unbelievably help our economy. It's like this trickle up economics. And I think that, you know, when you give people healthcare and they're not stressing about putting food on the table versus their kids' asthma medicine, well, maybe they can afford that new car this year. So, you know, I just think that that's where you get an economic boost. So Medicare for all is huge for me. Climate crisis is our second big one. And yes, I support the Green New Deal, but I'm even talking just more specifically about the climate aspects and the stuff that, especially being in Florida. And then our third big issue is criminal justice reform.
So let's go back to climate. What is it that you were saying, specifically being in Florida, which is understandable? I mean, the way things are going, we could lose Florida. What is it you want to see happen?
Well, we need to rein in the development. And at every level. Now, granted, it's at the municipal levels, and on every commission, there's somebody who they're allowing the buildings of more and more and more on a beach as the shoreline is eroding. They're not helping brace up the infrastructure. So they're building these new buildings on a declining beach. And in the meantime, they're dredging out all the natural flora. They're dredging out the mangroves. They're dredging out the sea grapes. They're building a new 100-yacht marina in Fort Lauderdale right now, and they're not replanting the vegetation in a way that is conducive to keeping our ecosystem. So there's things that are very specific to here. Our inland waters are being poisoned by industrial agriculture and the blue-green algae. I mean, there's so many things that are specific to Florida, and yet what's happening is they just keep building things. You pay off enough people.
Because I remember when Rick Scott was governor, I think I read that he said that his administration would not even use the phrase in their official messaging, climate change. What are these people thinking, Jen? Are they just ostriches? I mean,
no, they know. To me, well, okay, so the angel on the shoulder says, oh, they just don't know any better. And the devil on the shoulder says, no, they don't. They know, they just don't care. And they're trying to siphon every little bit of last money they could get out of it for them and their friends before we're underwater. And this gets very much to down here. We're having a lot of racial gentrification in a sense that's environmental. Because in Miami-Dade, not in my district, but Little Haiti is on the highest ground in Miami-Dade. And so developers are now coming in there and basically kicking people out of their neighborhood because they want higher ground. And most of the time, the environmental racism is the other direction. You have the communities of color that are usually stuck in the low ground and in the worst potential environmental situation. And that is often true. But then even when they're not, now we're seeing how that works.
So the main trouble someone like yourself would have is that you have whole generations of people who grew up with Debbie Wasserman Schultz as their congresswoman. And so her name just looms so large there, right? And so you need help just getting your name out. I felt this way in my presidential campaign. Once I was in front of people, there wasn't a problem, but getting yourself in front of people who have institutional biases that they think you can't win or you don't have anything new to say or whatever, and the power of the establishment and keeping the conversation to itself. So I want all of you, I'm sure all of you who are watching are already well aware that what Jen represents, what Jen Pereman represents in district, it's Florida
23.
Florida 23 is something that's the new vision for the Democratic Party. It's the new vision for America. It's the gift that needs to be offered to the American people, whether it has to do with single payer healthcare, whether it has to do, I assume you're for free college?
Absolutely.
What about the college loan debt? What do you want to do?
Yeah, you know what's fun? This is where I can almost get a little wonky because my fellow BNC slate mate, Kimberly Graham, who just lost in Iowa, but her idea I think is brilliant. And no, I think that if you take out a loan that has a reasonable interest rate and you take out that loan knowing what it is, I don't think there's a problem with people having to pay that back. That's not what the problem is. The problem is the inordinate amount of people that took out a loan for $20,000. They've already paid 30 and now they owe like another 30 because of how this has gone. So it's usury. And that's really what my problem is. So I would absolutely forgive any usury debt that is owed. And I absolutely think that an additional 4 years, college, trade school, apprenticeship, whatever somebody wants to do. So yeah, I mean, people look at it like you're just forgiving everybody's loans. And I don't think that. I had some loans that were reasonable and I paid them off and it wasn't usury. And I think that's reasonable. It depends. But I think public schools need to be tuition free. And that's the key difference. If you want to take out a loan and go to a private school and it's not, a loan that's, I find, amoral, then that doesn't bother me.
I think that anything that helps people thrive, anything that helps people spread their wings, like you said, it's the bottom-up economy. This is what's actually going to feed the economy because it feeds the creativity and productivity of the American people. Everybody, help her get there. If you want her to get there, we've got to help her get there. Please go to gen2020.com. gen2020.com and tell your friends. If you have a Twitter account, if you have Facebook, if you have Snapchat, if you have Instagram, you have a platform. You can talk to people. You can talk to people both who are in Florida and Florida 23, but it goes much bigger than that. No matter where you are, you can give a donation, and there is no donation that's too small either. And in addition to that, Jen, people can still phone bank for you from wherever they are, correct?
Yes, actually, we have our whole system up and running. It's extremely user friendly. And there's also text banking that people can help with. So not everybody is comfortable talking on the phone. And there's all sorts of ways people can help. If, we're always looking for somebody to help with graphic design or somebody to help, like there are so many ways people can help our campaign from exactly where they are. And it's, we like in-kind donations.
Yeah, I got it. Very, very good. Okay, now there are a couple of people who'd like to ask you questions. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely.
Okay, first is a woman named Susie Troop, and we're going to ask Susie if she'll come into the Zoom room and unmute yourself. Hi, Susie, how are you?
Hi, Marianne. I'm good, thank you.
Nice to meet you, and ask away. This is Jen, and ask whatever you want to ask.
Hi, Jen. My concern is about Social Security. I'm wondering, they're talking about cutting it. I would like to know what you would do to defend it and make sure that it lasts for all of us.
Yeah, that's a good question, especially in South Florida. We definitely have an older population down here. But the first thing I think that we have to do is take the cap off so that everybody at all income levels are paying to the full extent of their income. So you need to remove the cap. But more importantly, we need to make sure that it never gets privatized. So I think that like there are certain things that you could do to protect it, but it also needs to be expanded. I don't think that benefits are enough. I mean, people that live on Social Security are really not at a safety net that's really, I think, with dignity. So, people, if they don't have other income, cannot really rely just on Social Security. So I think we need to expand it. And I think we do that by eliminating the cap. And yeah, I think that's the best way to.
People say that if we eliminate the cap, it won't expand it, it will just save it. So isn't there more that we could do for our elders in America? And I know that mean a lot to the people in your district.
There should be more that you can do. I mean, Social Security, and it's sort of the same concept with the minimum wage. These are things that need to be tied to standard of living and cost of living.
Right.
So anything that we do that creates Social Security to be tied with cost of living would be an improvement. So right now, and right now it's just not. So I just think we need to put more money into it and expand benefits and just make sure that everybody has a safety net. But I also think that when you have things like Medicare for all, and or a universal basic income, that there are other things that can help contribute to lift up people at their social safety.
UBI certainly would. Yeah, UBI absolutely would be an additional. What do you think, Susie? Did you get what you needed?
I think so.
Is it?
I don't know. I would want to know, actually, if it were to be expanded, how would that work? How would that work?
You mean if expanded in terms of people that get Social Security?
Getting more money.
Yeah, it would be something that would be based on what our cost of living is, and not, I mean, we don't adjust those numbers to inflation. We don't adjust them to cost of living. We don't adjust them to anything. So they need to be so that it's something that's livable for people to live with dignity. And it isn't right now. It isn't.
It isn't. You can't live on Social Security. There's no way.
Of course not. And you should be able to, at least to the extent that you can live in a small place and have a life with dignity. It's just everybody needs a social safety net. So whether it's coming from Social Security, UBI, Medicare for all, a combination thereof, it's a matter of, how are we willing to let people live as a society? What do we agree should be like a minimum standard of existence? And we need to just keep with that. And I think that there's a lot of ways to get to that, but nobody should have to be struggling and not being able to eat if they're living on Social Security. And I think that is the case.
And I think the basic issue there is how you see government's role. And we have bought into this idea, and people have been propagandized to think that government shouldn't have a moral conscience. Government shouldn't represent an ethical view like that. You're talking about, particularly if you're talking about people who are older, people who have brought up children, people who have had families, people who have worked in careers, and particularly women. Women in general get much less Social Security than men do because their work was in the home. Their work wasn't necessarily in the professional workplace. And it really has to do with how do we see our elders? How do we see our people? What do we see as government's responsibility to people? And, so many people have bought into this idea that it's not government's business. If it's not government's business, then who are we and what are we? So I
Say
don't-
that about a lot of things, not just Social Security, to my way of thinking.
And
Yeah.
what do you mean by that, Susie? What do you mean by that?
Well, I'm thinking of the Black community and the people who don't earn decent livings there.
Right.
Those
children.
and they're raising their families. I mean, I really feel for them, to tell you the truth.
Right. And we have 13 million children who go to school hungry in America, even
Right.
before the pandemic. I think every school in America should be a palace of learning and culture and the arts. The idea that we base our educational funding primarily on property taxes is so immoral to me. Every school in America should be so filled. You know, if you don't get to these children before the age of 8, then they're already in a statistical economic lockdown for the rest of their lives.
Right.
Thank you, Susie. Thank you so much.
Thank
Jen,
you, Mary.
Thanks, Susie.
Thanks.
Another question, Jen, is that okay with you?
Sure.
Okay, Emmanuel George. Emmanuel George, join us in the Zoom room and unmute yourself. Hi.
Hello, how y'all doing? Just have a question in regards to reparations. Just want to ask specifically for like the Black community. Gentrification is something that is coming to a Black community near you, and some communities has already been coming to. What is your action moving forward to assist and help the Black community? Like, what is your agenda specifically for the Black community in light of gentrification?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we see it everywhere. We see it. And I know that where you are specifically, you have that Dania Point. There's like, you know, it's the rich white patriarchy coming into communities. And instead of having communities build themselves up and be their own thriving communities, and I heard it the other day when he said that these aren't communities, these are colonies. And I thought that was really profound. And that's what it is. So you've got somebody else profiting off of your location in your community, and none of that money stays there. So that's the whole point to me about reparations, actually, is getting that money into the communities so the communities can build how they want to build and in the direction they want to go. And they can have the culture that they want and the businesses that they want, and be, you know, somewhat self-contained as far as any community should be. Like, there is no reason that those things have to have money going to people outside of your community. You know, with the exception of certain things like banking, there is no reason that you can't have things that profit the Black communities in their communities. And that, to me, is what we should be working on everywhere, is sustainable communities. But the Black communities are the most vulnerable, and it's like I said, it's like a triage, and that's just where the most help is needed right now. So that's where you start.
To say that, but it's another to actually do it. And that's why in my plan, the idea of the 500 billion or whatever the number was, the way I assumed it, I thought to myself, you could have, I mean, obviously there's some very, very successful African-American real estate moguls. And let's say the Reparations Council said, we should buy real estate. So in other words, you're talking about going into these Black communities. Wouldn't it be great if the Reparations Council had the money? They just bought those 5 blocks. If they wanted to spend it, that's why I feel giving it the money to this Reparations Council on these gentrification things. You know, when you talk about something like, oh, we're going to have a law and Emmanuel's grandmother can't be kicked out of her apartment that she's been in for 30 years because that's unfair to her. That's still not allowing for the accumulation of wealth and wealth creation that you were talking about. And that's why I really love the idea that there's so much money there and the actual ability to spend it. So someone could look at an area that's gentrified and just say, we're buying those blocks. I thought it was a very exciting idea, actually, and I hope that you'll consider it.
I love your idea.
Yeah, these little piecemeal ideas, you know, we keep saying, give it back to the communities, but how are you going to do it? Because as you said earlier, Jen, unless it's actually wealth creation opportunities, not just, you know, if all it is just, oh, everybody will be able to survive. I don't think that's quite enough. And I know that you don't either.
No, there needs to be a way to accumulate generational wealth. I mean, there is a reason that the disparity continues to exist. It isn't because there aren't occasional educational opportunities here and there that are scattered throughout. It's that there is no foundation, there's no infrastructure. And this is something else that I also have learned. When you steal people's history, you steal a very big part of their strength. And this is something that I know of in our communities, in our Black communities down here, where there basically have been steamrolled in terms of their schooling and their history and their culture, and a lot of things that were basically taken away from white infrastructure and supremacy that comes in and says, okay, this is now how you need help. We're going to help you how we think you need help.
But that's really what I'm saying to you, which is enough with, oh, they need to spend. I mean, what is the actual plan? You know, I really think there's so much talk at this point. Can we just put some money on the table and start talking about doing it? And that's, I really believe, my idea was granting the money over a period of 20 years, but I really like that idea in terms of real estate, and specifically in answer to what you were saying, Emmanuel, that if a group had the money, gentrification, the best way to do it is you could buy the building. But really the way to do it is to basically buy those blocks.
Yeah.
Then you're talking about some real estate development, and Black people would be deciding, and Black people would be doing it, and not white people. To me, it's just a continuation of the paternalism, how we're going to do it. It's really.
Yeah, see, imagine, Emmanuel, if there was this nice endowment for Dania Beach, and it was the endowment, and I don't know, whatever name you give it, the reparations endowment for your community, and you get to be on a board, and you're given this chunk of money that you can invest into your community as you see fit amongst your people. And it's like, then you would be able to do all the things that you would want to do, and all you would have to do is just have the idea. And then that's how I see reparations.
What do you do for a living, Emmanuel?
I have a print shop. Me and a friend of mine, a close friend of mine I grew up with, we started our own printing services so that we can fund ourselves and be able to hopefully to employ other people. And I'm also a curator. I curate at quite a few art galleries. And my main purpose, Ms. Pereman can tell you, is I'm working towards bringing the J.A. Ely Historical Museum into South Broward, because South Broward, we have a rich Black history of 4 historic Black communities, but we do not have anywhere where we can preserve our history. And the J.A. Ely Historical Museum and Resource Hub would be a place to preserve the rich Black history of South Broward, as well as the Resource Hub being an indicator for community development through coding, tech, STEM, art galleries, just things that's creative for the Black community that we can use and that we can be self-sufficient. And not only that, but then it'll also be a landmark for the cultural tourism economy, which is something that many, the Black community that we need to be a part of. Because when down here in South Florida, and Florida in general, tourism is what, drives the economy. So cultural tourism is something that we need to be a part of. And being that is that, like, using the history of our Black communities to attract other like-minded Black entrepreneurs to invest into the community. Like, you look at Overtown, which is considered the Harlem of the South. Overtown has the Black Archives. They have the Lyric Theater, which was like the Showtime at the Apollo of Black Miami. They have the Black Police Precinct. They have Jackson Soul Food, which has been there since 1946. And they have D.A. Dorsey House, who's the first Black self-made millionaire in Miami. And how the history of Overtown, of these places that I just mentioned, is now attracting other like-minded Black creatives. That's why you have space called Tribe, which is a Black-owned co-working space. That's why you have the Urban, which is a 58,000 square foot event space. That's why they have, they're rebuilding the Harlem Square Club, which is where Sam Cooke performed live at the Harlem Square Club back in the days, which is one of the greatest live albums according to Rolling Stone. So the history of Overtown is what is bringing in economic growth. Also, Red Rooster, which was in Harlem, is now in Overtown. So same thing for South Broward, in the same way where, the J.A. Ely Historical Museum, because we were home to a Black high school that was addicts, which was destroyed by integration, which was basically because I went to South Broward High School, but South Broward High School was an all-white high school back in the day. And the thing was that South Broward High School in Hollywood Hills, they integrated Addicts High School, which was a Black high school, simply because Black students were prospering and going to Spelman and Morehouse and FAMU and prestigious HBCUs, and they were doing this off of hand-me-down resources, off of hand-me-down books from South Broward High School that had pages torn in them, and they were still prospering and getting their education, as well as through athletics, because a lot of the athletes in Addicts High School were dominating recreationally the kids from South Broward. So they used those, the Black athletics, Black students to integrate to help boost up South Broward High School and Hollywood Hills as well. So, and then you also had the Palms nightclub, which was a nightclub in Hallandale where Sam Cooke, Jackie Wilson, James Brown, Etta James, Nat King Cole, pretty much like it was part of the chitlin circuit. And they were all in Hallandale, and many people do not know this history. And also, like James Brown, his auntie stayed not too far from where I lived. Her name was Aunt Shug. And when James Brown used to come down here, Black people couldn't sleep, sleep on the east side of the train tracks. So he would stay in Liberia where his aunt lived. So, if we highlight the history that we had, phenomenal entertainment, phenomenal education, these are things that can be used to help our community economically because we highlight the history. So now we can have like our own renaissance, our own form of culture and things of that nature. Yeah.
Wow, that was so inspiring, and it gives me such hope for our country. At a time like this, it's so important that we remember that while some systems are devolving, other systems are evolving. And what are evolving with this spirit of reinvigoration are the ideas presented by people like yourself. And everything that he was just saying, Jen, if he was just capitalized, think what he could do.
Right. Well, what's funny is I originally found Emmanuel because, and he didn't say this, but he's an artist. And he was doing like urban art and doing really cool stuff and just really beautifying. And I saw his stuff on Facebook, and I just reached out because I just thought he looks cool. I should talk to him. And then there was this exhibit that he did in a museum that's not in our district. And I just felt inspired, and he inspired me. And I feel like what he's wanting to do is so important because this is where I realized that when you take people's history from them, you make them weak in so many ways, and you also make them look like lesser than. If somebody doesn't have a history and they don't have roots and they don't have anything, then they're lesser than. And I just think that is so crucial, and we've sucked the history out of these neighborhoods. Well, and I just don't like that.
And there's it's really a very profound history, and I think that people are ready to tell it. We just need to provide the opportunities. If you can even look civil rights movement, there's this huge historical richness, as Emmanuel was saying. I hope that, Emmanuel, all the things that you want to do come to pass. And I hope that with Jen and others like-minded people in Congress, that there will be efforts on the federal level that would help you to bring to pass and to actualize all your dreams, because it wouldn't be just your community. America will be a better place when those things happen. And thank you so much. I was very moved. I'm sure other people were as well.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Emmanuel.
Thank you. What else, Jen? What are the other issues that you think people should know about with you? I want all of you to remember, you can go to jen2020.com. And also you will see the endorsement page and our own donate page. It's in the chat room. What's your address on Twitter, Jen? JenFL23. And that's the same on Instagram. We're JenFL23. And then we're Jen2020 on Facebook. Jen2020.com. Try to keep it as simple as possible. It's funny, I used to introduce myself as Jennifer, and then when we started this, now it's just Jen, because it's just so much easier. Right.
But yeah. I think what people need to know is that this campaign is about them. This is about justice. This is, Bernie always said, it's not me, it's us. And it really is true. And now that he has sort of stepped aside, and there's certain people that are like, well, now what? And I'm thinking, that's what he already told you. It's not about him. It's the movement. It's us. That's the whole point, is it isn't about one person. And I feel so privileged that I've been able to do this. I've been doing this now for 1.5 years, and it's hard, but it's been such a privilege. And it is something that I feel should be available to everybody. And everybody should be able to do a term of service and represent their community. This is not something that should be a 2-year process of fundraising and schmoozing and having to get huge amounts of money to compete to do this, so that it essentially locks people out of participating. And so I feel like I do this on behalf of those people, and I'm in a privileged position where I can. And it's been amazing. And it's just, this is about justice. This is about everybody being able to do what I'm doing right now. That's what it's about.
Well, particularly the House of Representatives, the founders called it the People's House. They thought it would be the farmer and the blacksmith and the tailor. And like you said, the money just, it makes it so such an unrealizable goal for the vast majority of people. And I think that that has led to this collective throwing up of hands, this collective chronic disengagement with the political process. And if it was an easier thing to participate in, I think more people might participate in it. And of course, with the current makeup of the Supreme Court, we're not going to be overturning Citizens United anytime soon. But hopefully you can work towards, when you're in there, you can work towards a constitutional amendment to establish public funding for federal campaigns.
Absolutely.
And in the meantime, everybody, it's up to you and me. It is what it is. And like I said, please don't underestimate what your $5 can do, your $10, whatever you have.
I get $1. I get $1. I'm happy for it. You know, I mean, we usually say 23 for District 23. That's like our sort of, you know, average number, but I get $1. It's all good.
And you know, guys, it's all the things that you know. She has to have staff. She has to have, I suppose, Facebook ads or whatever you have. And it's you know, it's interesting to hear Jen talk about the fact that she's enjoying the process. I remember asking last night when we were wait, which was last night? Last night was Sean, yeah, Sean Chowdhury. And he was saying it was fun. And I know from my own experience that it's exhilarating, but it's also kind of brutal, stressful and anxiety producing. And I know how much difference it makes when you can really feel that people are out there rooting for you and helping you. And every time you see a donation come in, the fact, it's very touching because somebody gave their money. And I agree with Jen, sometimes even if it was that $1, and it all adds up.
Those are my donors. That's what I say. Those are my donors. When people ask me, are you going to support this? I'll say, look, I'll do what every other politician says. I'm going to check with my donors. I'm going to see what my donors want me to do. But that's, to me, everybody is an equal donor. Everybody is an equal donor.
That's right. So Jen Pereman can win. She can beat Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who has been there a long time. It's time. You know, I don't know. I say this a lot. It's a drum I keep beating. I don't know why Democrats are so afraid of challenging their leadership, or in this case, a past leadership. But it's this group that you can't question. Well, actually, we can. And I believe that we must. So this one, for those of us who do remember 2016, who really do feel that this establishment centrism sits on top of this rumbling, rising progressive sentiment that is really coming from the bottom of things, particularly among our young people, that whole group, they kind of just need to move aside. They've been there and they did some good things, and some things we agree with, some things we don't, but America's got to be on the move. And in every other area of life, it's understood there are always going to be people behind you who are challenging you, and you better stay relevant. And they don't have to stay relevant because they get the money from the same establishment sources. It's not cool. The American people need to stand up to that. And the American people need to reclaim our government. And part of reclaiming our government, despite the fact that there is that undue corporate influence on the way it functions, is for each and every one of us to participate. If you felt moved by what Jen talked about here, if you would like to see this race go in the way she's talking about, someone standing up for reparations, somebody replacing the old establishment, the old guard in the Democratic Party, I hope that you will go to jen2020.com. I hope you will follow her at JenFL23, you said, on Twitter. I hope that you will go to her website. I hope you will donate. I hope that you will phone bank for her or whatever. Because if we want things to change, every one of us has to be an instrument of change. And one of the ways we're instruments of change is by helping change agents go to Washington. So that's it for tonight. Jen Pereman, I wish you the very, very best. I'm so glad that we met. I'm so glad that I have learned about your campaign. I'm supporting you in any way possible. And I was so moved by Susie. I was so moved by Emmanuel. And I see great things for Emmanuel too. All my very best to you, everyone. Tomorrow night, it's going to be a very exciting night at the down ballot Progressive Candidate Summit. I have talked a bit about Keita Haynes in Nashville, Tennessee. I very much look forward to introducing you to her. She has a profound story, very moving, very touching. Let's get her into Congress too. But tonight belongs to Jen. Jen Pereman, Florida 23. All my best to you. God bless you. I hope you win.
Thank you so much. You are amazingly inspirational to me. You don't remember meeting me in 16, but we met in 2016.
You know what? Howie told me that. Was it when I went there to support? Oh, I'm sorry. What was his name?
Tim, you came down to do a thing, and I met you. I was a volunteer on the campaign, and I met you.
Wow! Wow!
That was really cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, this time we take it a step further.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. God bless you. Good night, everybody. See you
Good
tomorrow.
night.
Have a wonderful day tomorrow. Bye-bye.